there's 8 billion people on this planet. If you think you're the only one having an experience, well, I've got some swampland for sale. Um, there's, and granted, teachers were thrown at me, and not all of them had patience. Yes, we are all special. We are all uniquely divine. We are a lens for the universe to transmit energy. And in that, how can you not be special? And yet, you're not that special, Sharon. You're just not, or Doug. That wanting to be the next great master or the next world savior is dangerous, because it's you're assuming supremacy, and the universe doesn't operate that way. And so comes from a deficiency of self and in feeling you're not worthy. And so my goal is to show everybody how worthy they are, and if they knew how precious they were, if they knew how loved they were, the world would be a very different place.
And welcome back to the Consciousness of the Way. I'm very excited to welcome to the podcast Laurie Rivers, an astrologer for many lifetimes and quite a few decades in this biological time frame, and a master of energetic healing, spiritual awakening. She's been teaching people this wisdom, talk, and understanding for many decades. I want to welcome to the podcast, Laurie. How are you, my dear friend?
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's good to be here.
Yeah, it is. It's always a meeting of the old proverbial minds that realize that it's just the now moment. This resonance is all we have. So why don't, without any further ado, why don't we just take a brief stroll down memory lane and give us an idea of how you got here?
How I got here in this moment, or
No,
here?
in this moment, how you brought yourself to that point of self-realization through your own mastery, because this has been going on
Oh gosh,
for many, 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 many
many
conscious
decades.
moments.
Yeah. Well, I I was born, and I was born very ill.
Mm-hmm.
And I was operated on at 11 days old. And in 1969, that didn't give me a good shot at physical life. And they told my mother to prepare for me to die.
Mm-hmm.
I only had a 20% shot. And I bring that up because when I was 5 years old, I was asking about the scar on my tummy. And my mom told me this winsome tale of peril and how I was supposed to die. And she said, and they said you had an 80% chance of dying.
Mm-hmm.
And in my little brain, I took 80 from 100, and it took me a minute. And I said, but mom, that would leave 20%. That's pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a start. I was fortunate enough to have my family's library. So unlike many Americans, my family could read back in the 1800s, and they were transcendentalists. So some of the first books my guidance showed me, and I mean my guidance when I was 2 and 3, was were books by Emerson and Thoreau and the poetry of Whitman. And I was a voracious reader and lived in the library, and I was drawn to metaphysics. However, I was also a nerd, and I would say prove it. I didn't take anything on face value. Um, from there, and I read also, I didn't even realize it wasn't until later that it clicked, but I read Think and Grow Rich when I was probably about 9, and put it to the side with many other things, which is a primer for mental focus, right? That's all it is. It's not about getting rich, it's about mental focus. And so I manifested being an exchange student to Belgium at 15 from Oregon, of all places, a little tiny town. Now, you guys have to remember, we didn't have the internet. It was 1985. It was a few years till it came. And I lived with a countess. She picked me. And she had driven Red Cross trucks during World War II across the battlefields and drove still like it in her 70s, I can tell you that. She introduced me to thinkers and energy workers in Brussels, which I thought was kind of weird at 15. And I had my very first very strange, almost time out of time experience on a trip to France with her. She took me on a road trip. And when we were in Rouen, I smelled smoke. Now, I didn't know. I was 15. And again, from Oregon. There weren't very many, it was mostly farms when I was young. And it was the Portlandia, wasn't Portlandia, we'll put it that way. And I smelled smoke. And my eyes were burning. It was acrid, and we were walking down this road. And I was getting very concerned. My father was a firefighter, you know, and so I'm like, "Whoa, there's smoke. We're in trouble. We're in trouble." And Aunt Gabby, she looked at me and she said, "My dear, hold on, hold on, hold on. Keep walking." She knew because she knew where we were headed, and it was to where Jeanne d'Arc had been burned. And I saw the pyre. And no one else noticed. And I thought I was crazy, but it was real. And that led me to asking questions. I don't know. I don't know that it was a past life. I could have just slipped into a stream of consciousness, a memory, because it's a very strong memory. There's a memorial. People go to see it. I would never be, um, I would never have the hubris to say that that was my lifetime. Let's put it that way. But I had an experience. And from there were more questions and more weird things. And then I went to England for university several years later. And well, that was its own thing because, well, it was the university I went to. The campus was used in the Harry Potter movies. So my children tell everyone I went to Hogwarts. Uh, and spiritualism was tossed my direction. And I wasn't so sure about that. Some of those ceremonies at 18, I'm like, okay. But these experiences kept happening to me. I wasn't looking for them. In fact, a lot of times I would sit there going, "This is really weird," and I don't know that I like this kind of weird. But it was guidance was you have an agreement. This is your experience, and over time, and then 95, I was in Bahrain, and the internet was new. And I volunteered to teach people how to use computers in exchange for use of the internet because it was very expensive in 1995 and I had a 2-year-old. And I was seeking healing because of other trauma, and psychology sucked in the 1990s. And I fell into a teacher, or he fell into me, I guess. A lovely Australian man who I've never had the privilege of meeting in real life, but we'd have known each other 30 years now. And he would send me 20-page emails. I had no access to books on astrology in Bahrain because there weren't any in English. And I questioned that. And it was, I use astrology as a framework of understanding and taking all the other experiences. Whether it's the energy work, I've learned how to, you know, field, I would say. The term master is something that's a bit of a tricky one, isn't it? Because people often use that as a moniker for ego. I would say the subjects usually master you versus you master them. But it's been a lifetime. So I'm a lot of things, and I call myself an astrologer because it's the easiest framework to understand. So that's how I got here.
Oh, amen to that, my friend. I'm very excited because, this space that we're in, I've personally consciously been on my self-realization for about 36 years myself.
Right.
And so looking around at how things have transformed the
Mm-hmm.
the information, the experiences, how they receive this material. Being an ordained in two lineages, ordained priest in two lineages of Taoism, we have fundamental ancient rituals that are certifiably repeatable because they've been handed down for generation to generation
Yes.
for thousands of years, imbued with this currency that can be met every time you apply it, as if you're just reading from a script. The energy, the
Yes.
charge that you and I are receiving right now from this communion is the very action that comes from meeting that resonance. And of
Yes.
course, there's the effect that takes place. We're creating union. And that's
Yes.
the charge that you and I are receiving. That is that
Yes.
state. And we're meeting it. So now it becomes one, as it always is. It's
Yes.
never separated, yet we're very much aware of this. For all my parapsychologist friends, we just call this psychokinesis. Sure, whatever
Yes.
you want to call it, however you
Right.
want to dip into that substance we
Right.
call the fajin, it
Mm.
is there. It
Mhm.
is, it's tangible, it's real. And from that, as a creator, as a default, we're able to play with this substance like,
Yes.
clay, and
Yes.
shape and mold things in this material state. You mentioned this before our we went on air. The simplicity of what you're speaking of is so potent to a Taoist path, because we refer to this as bringing immortality and crystallizing it into the material state.
Yes.
And that is very much in line. I don't want to misquote you, but you mentioned something very similar in your path of teaching and
Yes.
how you experience and share that with others.
Yes. Yes.
How would you
Oh,
describe?
when I talk about the astrology chart, and
Mhm,
I my main goal with clients and the general public is to remind them that you are a slice of time and space crystallized into physical form,
mhm,
and we are here to spiritualize matter, not to dematerialize, to spiritualize the universe. The universe is already spiritual. That's what it is. It is spirit. It is the quantum. And we've had this wonderful, miraculous, real long shot of having all of those particles and quarks coalesce into a physical body and a crystallization of form. So that's why I was excited when you invited me. I was like, oh, well, Taoism is about as close as it gets to my philosophy. So yeah, yeah.
yeah, it really does. I mean, most people, when they hear me explain it or furthermore show them, they're like, I never. That's not how I viewed Taoism. I viewed
Mhm.
Taoism as that, bleeded out, 20-year-old tattoo that someone has on the back of their neck, and it's a yin and yang, which I think
Right,
comes from a Taoist thing. I'm not
right,
sure, but I know it's good and bad. And
right,
I'm like, well, that's a great basement level, assessment of what that might be.
right.
Yet once you embody that, that
Uh,
actually is your bat signal. That is the
Yeah,
actual template you can lay down and create a reality that is considered supernatural, superhuman,
yeah,
paranormal
yeah.
with this fundamental infrastructure.
Mhm.
And so, I really appreciate the fact that you have a much deeper insight, because 99% of people, when I explain Taoism to them, they're like, I would have jumped on that like 20, 30 years ago if I had an understanding like the one you just described to me,
Right.
because it's not in line. I just see a bunch of dusty old dudes just telling everyone to be quiet and still the mind. And from what I can see, the Tao Te Ching is about misery. It's never answered, and you're always going to find discontent through this scripture, which is absolutely a lie. No one, if someone mentions that, they've never read the Tao Te
I was
Ching.
going to say no, they hadn't.
And furthermore, the one I transcribed from my teacher Latsu last year is the most potent access to self-realization, because
Yes.
we refer to that as the magical register. So
Yes.
every verse is an incantation, an experience that has 81 levels of consciousness.
Mhm.
Also, it has a frequency, a shape, and a color that is associated with that experience. And that's why people are like, holy crap. When I meet that, it brings me to whole. I return to
Yes.
whole.
Yes.
It's the primordial mother mirroring back what is deficient and returning your inverted experience to the center line that
Yes.
makes you one. That
Yes.
charge that you and I are getting is
Yeah.
exactly that validation.
Yeah.
And that's really, I believe, and so most people, when I have conversation with them, are like, oh, I've I've discovered this new perception of reality, and I've got this insight, and I've been. Have you ever thought maybe you're a Taoist? They're like, what are you talking about?
Right.
Oh shit! And they go, oh shit! Oh,
Right.
I thought I was special. Oh shit!
Oh, it's that desire to be special is often in the way because as somebody, I mostly make content around astrology and I weave the other messages in the cracks. And people are like, they'll ask, is this going to affect me more than everybody else? And I was like, one, why would you want that? You know, if it's not necessarily pleasant, why would you want to be alone in your struggle? Second of all, there's 8 billion people on this planet. If you think you're the only one having an experience, well, I've got some swampland for sale. Um, there's, and granted, teachers were thrown at me, and not all of them had patience. So some of the old dudes, the crusty old dudes that I studied with, were they did not have good bedside manners, and so I was trained kind of traditionally.
Right.
But yeah, but it's hubris. Yes, we are all special. We are all uniquely divine. We are a lens for the universe to transmit energy. And in that, how can you not be special? And yet, you're not that special, Sharon. You're just not, or Doug. That wanting to be the next great master or the next world savior is dangerous because it's you're assuming supremacy and the universe doesn't operate that way. And so it's from comes from a deficiency of self and in feeling you're not worthy. And so my goal is to show everybody how worthy they are. And if they knew how precious they were, if they knew how loved they were, the world would be a very different place.
What
Not the
a
first person to teach that, but go ahead.
what a beautiful road into what we understand as a seeker to a knower. There is a clear progression from a psychological state that turns into this all-knowing embodiment of the now moment. From a Taoist, we look at it like this. It starts with the spark of divinity. We refer to that as desire. As desire moves into inquiry then nurtures contemplation. Contemplation then boosts this thing called curiosity. Curiosity then nurtures and blossoms hopium. Hopium's
Mhm.
potent. But
Mhm.
from hopium, then we start to frame out our belief system because you're met with experiences that can only be met by the individual. That belief system is then catapulted into a knowing from the experiences that are met through your own journey. Now
Yeah.
that can be determinative as a lens of within Taoism, it's just yin and yang. But
Right.
within the experiencer as a psychological state, that can be considered good or bad. And that
Yes.
fueled by the emotions of the humanists, we, Houston, we have a problem. If you're
Right.
not understanding how this transitory symbiosis that keeps blossoming, completing, and then creating again, you could have a shitty life if you stay there in that
Oh,
resonance and sit
absolutely.
in that
Yeah.
experience because that's
Yeah.
your belief system. I'm not
Yeah.
taking it away from you, and
Yes.
it's only valued and turned into a knowing. Well, life sucks.
Yeah.
I've got lifetime of experiences that would refer to life sucks, and that's
Yeah.
absolutely sobering and a conscious moment, but it's a limited moment. You're
Yeah.
not tapping into your full potential.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's why when it comes to astrology, people will use their chart as a tool of determinism. This is why I had all those horrible things happen.
Oh,
And
I know where
this is
you're going right
why
now, my friend.
I will always have a horrible life, not understanding that the chart is a framework of understanding it. And the glyphs, which are not ancient, by the way, if I hear that these are ancient glyphs, one more time, I will lose my temper. But they are from the 1530s. They're alchemical symbols. If you go back to Chaldea, or Chaldea, depending on how you pronounce it, they were not the same symbols. The only symbol that's remained concurrent is the moon. Everything, and Mercury came along during the Hellenistic period. Everything else was fashioned by the alchemists, who were astrologers, because you had to be able to read. Um, they're alchemical symbols. And if we take it from an alchemical state of mind, then we understand there is a spectrum of expression. And yes, some of that is suffering, some of that is abuse, some of that is a dark night of the soul, 100%. And at the same time, if you can switch the lens and the perception, and as you described the walk of the Tao, your understanding is your Mercury, the desire is your Venus, the spark of life, the animating force is your sun. Those have frequencies of expression. Not every Scorpio is going to be the same, not every Gemini is going to be the same, but they will have themes. Okay. If you can broaden your lens, you can move yourself off the good bad polarity. And that is a lot of work. And it's a very worthy endeavor. So
It's fascinating you say that, because within Taoism we have these fundamentals, our relationship with the cosmos. If you want to water it down to an identity, we could go there, but let's just say our relationship with the cosmos consists of the 12 animals and the five
yes,
elements.
yes,
People seem to not be given access to, and this is the exciting part of Taoist journey and self-realization and
yes,
cultivation, is nothing is ever as it seems. It's
right,
a cultural thing that goes 2 steps forward, 5 steps back, 3 steps forward, two
yes,
steps to the side.
yes.
And this is the part where the experiencer starts to realize that whatever you're experiencing is not the truth. And they go,
Exactly. It's
what?
a very subjective thing.
Right, right, and it's torturous until otherwise noted, because you know what
Yes,
you know, you don't know what you don't know, and
yes,
so the pinnacle, the piece de resistance within that cosmology, as we will put it for a Taoist, is the 12 animals integrated with the five elements,
yes.
and the high point is, what is it, Jeff? I always talk in the third person. I find it interesting because people are like, if you don't have a question, I'll give it to you and you can answer it right now. Hang on. How did you know what I was thinking? This is what we do.
Right.
The part of that, the 18th point, which we refer to within a substance accelerated point of completion, is that you are all these things. And people
Yes,
go, whoa,
yes, yes,
holy moly, hang on.
yes.
So I'm not just a scorpion. I'm not just a
No,
monkey. I'm not just
no,
a
no, you're
horse.
all of it.
I'm not just a Capricorn. What? Oh,
No.
holy moly. And then
Yeah,
you integrate that, but you have to cultivate that resonance.
yes,
There's a
yeah,
process, what we call the method to the madness. By using that alchemical process,
yes,
you can start to maestro, have imperium, have dominion over
yes,
this as the now moment, and then
yes.
magical things take place,
What they do.
which
Yes,
you and I are very familiar with, that happens
yes,
on
yes,
a now moment.
yes, yes. I'm in the Tao with the 12 animals and the five elements, which I'm lightly familiar, but I specialized in Western tropical just because of cultural understanding, like life's short.
Mhm.
But I
Right.
have friends who are practitioners who hail from Asia, and it's a beautifully intricate system. There's some crossover, by the way. That's fascinating.
Well,
Um,
it's the
yeah,
delusion of the I Ching. Unfortunately,
yeah,
that is a very diminished,
yeah,
broken system that is
yeah,
a misdirection, which people don't
right,
understand until they spend half a lifetime keep
right.
attempting to find substance from a very bankrupt and empty like tool, which
Yes,
is a manipulative tool.
yeah.
You know, just saying. But
Well, I was thinking of Batsi and Meng. Batsi is I have a Taiwanese friend who's a practitioner of Batsi, and then in Meng astrology, which is a little more with the elements, and it's very complex. I can't explain it, But I found it interesting that there's correspondences because humans are humans and they will channel energy as they channel energy. Five elements acupuncture is very responsible for this person having met this particular now in my healing journey as I healed myself. Because I was very fortunate living once again in a very small rural area for a lovely person beginning their journey as a licensed US acupuncturist, but having many generations as a Taiwanese traditional healer and had her many, many, many generations before her um, recipes for her apothecary. And how the universe, again, I'm very fortunate people arrive and the right people arrive every time at the right moment. And in the healing process that I was doing from an adventurous life, um, I knew that it was more than mental discipline and emotional discipline, and there was a physical component. And even though I had practiced body electronics, which is a form of sustained acupuncture in a group setting, um, I knew I was going to need more than that. And she showed up. And that was it was not just clinical, it's spiritual as well. And it was um, got rid of the goo, the residuals of when we're in suffering and creating lots of cortisol and adrenaline and we have to move that through. We have to move those toxins through the body, you know. And so having help and facilitation. And so anytime I hear the five elements, it gives me a fond warmness in my heart because it's very effective and it helps in integrating the self as well. And I know there's many modalities that go with it. I just happen to do the herbs and the teas and the acupuncture and often recommend it to those. Some people, Ayurvedic is probably more their route. Other people, it's going to be the five elements, but lots of routes. But yeah, so
Well, within the teaching that I share with people and deep into the alchemy, we refer to it as Nigong, internal
mhm,
power,
and
Nidan, the internal
it's
alchemy. But
and
furthermore, it's a lens of mastery that, quite frankly, that's why most of my students come from the native
mm,
landscape of
yeah,
China and
yeah,
parts of Asia, and they come out and train with me here in America because they've traveled to every Taoist temple across the globe,
right,
but they've never met someone that can show them what
okay,
that potency is and integrate it, and furthermore understand that everything comes from the primordial mother.
yes,
And this gets met with the muddy waters of distortion, as we put it, my dear friend the Buddhist monk would call the dukkha, when it's met with the egoic trials and tribulations of a testosterone driven individual that wants to claim they are a master. And it's a manipulative state that then becomes deficient because you're under this need of hierarchy.
yes,
And I'm here to share and transcend this energy so you remember who you are. I'm not
yes,
here to put you under the thumb so that you are forever in this endless relationship of approval and mommy and daddy issues and all the things that you get kept in the psychology. Because this is why I don't like a soul retrieval within Taoism. It's very much a muted manipulative state where people stay within the psychology. So they stay within the head and the heart, and they're not embodying or expanding to their
yes,
true self, which is
yes,
whole. You are
yes.
not these very limited positions. And most people start with the unassuming, well, go, we're just working out your triggers and traumas, but you're going to expand to that. And it never happens. What
No,
happens is you're just picking at a scab that never heals. It
yes,
goes
yeah,
on over and
reinfecting the
over and over
wound. Yeah,
for
mhm,
for a lifetime. And
yes,
that person that manipulates you with that will keep
yes.
you forever in the
Well,
forever.
you don't make very much money if people walk away integrated, do you? You know, although there's ways people will then can learn. There's lots of ways
Yeah,
to
yeah.
integrate. the
But
physical and the
but once
spiritual. But
you
yeah.
once you get
Mhm.
slapped spiritually with your own knowing, that's why the alchem from me, Dowist alchemy is second to none. Yeah, I'm a
Yeah.
fanboy. Sure, I'm a priest in two lineages of Taoism, but that's
Right.
not what I'm talking about because my
Right.
stuff goes beyond what
Yes.
is taught to me within the monastery.
Yes.
I'm using it because I have an intimate relationship with my teacher for over 36 years, Latsu. I
Yes.
channel him directly, have for all. It's like
Yes.
when you get that potency,
Yes.
it's second to none. You're getting direct source. And the goal for anyone, if there is one on their path of self realization, is to be met to know thyself as whole, which means
Yes.
you are the present moment. And
Yes.
that's the part where people go from what we call the selfishness to the selflessness through
Yes.
the sacrifice. And that's what people pucker
Yes.
up. That chill you and I got. And they're like, hang on, well, I was sacrificed. What? Well, but Jifu, I mean, when you're in service to others, you're in service to yourself.
Yes.
Oh, well, hang on. What? Well, I didn't get the memo.
Hmm.
Yes, servitude and selflessness is what is acquired from your ascended state. You can
Yes.
be a master of energy and still be an asshole.
Oh,
That does
absolutely.
not, you know.
People don't get that. They think, and I always tell people virtue is probably one of your greatest shadows. If you're worried about appearing virtuous, and you don't want people to think you're a bad person, you probably have a lot of work to do, because there's always an opportunity to be a villain in someone else's story, and sometimes it's fun. The universe does not care about the morality we have created, and that is a hard thing to wrap your head around.
Uh, my dear friend, this is what I literally repeat over and over again. The universe doesn't have a moral compass. You need to understand that. This is
Mhm.
this is all the symbiosis of this material, and
Yes,
you are putting identity to it, which then has this what we call distortion, and
yes,
that comes from your attention that is
yes,
met with your intention that
yes,
forms your own experience. So then you have
yes,
these layers of distortion, which we refer to as the currency.
yes,
This is electromagnetism. Now we are playing down, we're getting down with the get down and realizing what does it take to master that the meeting of those energies as whole. Then you have a direct state of now that can be referred to as information, energy, light.
yes.
And then from that, the repeatable experience will determine whether you are delusional or not,
Right.
because it must be met with an experience and a repeatable experience that you can then impart to others so they help
Yes,
remember who they are.
exactly. Yes, remembering exactly. Yeah. I I always tell people that worry and doubt and shame and fear are a misuse of imagination because they're usually not grounded in reality. They might be grounded in possibility, but why can't you use your imagination to be delusional in a more pleasant or comfortable manner? It's going to get that, it's as if we're looking at not likely to happen, why not ruminate on things that feel better? you know, and you open the pathway to receive a lot more interesting things because your attention can turn to see it. And so there's a lot of angst and over intellectualization in spiritual crowds. And again, you know, I'm an old girl. I've hung out around a lot of things. Um, and if people really realize the simplicity of it, it isn't as complicated as we like to make it out. We can stand on one foot and rub our belly and tap our head and try to invoke some deity or perception or frequency, and it will be real. But we can also just sit here and have a conversation and attune in conversation and reach an elevated consciousness. It could be that simple.
Oh, and I mean, that's the part that I love about Taoist magic,
Yeah.
because, your intimate relationship with the universe will show you said evidence in this material state.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, your Sherlock to your Watson will be met with that self realization.
Yeah.
Elementary, my dear Watson,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
human condition that's so painful for most,
Mhm.
through that labyrinth. of the finite,
Yes.
bankrupt intellect.
Yeah.
You get out the other end and you realize the human being is the potency of the now moment. And you're
Yes.
unified with that. You're able to master something. I know you don't like that word, but it
Well, I'm
really is
okay
a
with the word
conditioning.
master. I'm
It's a
just,
conditioning.
yeah, no, and mastery is an ongoing process. I mean, I
Mhm.
know you know what the word means. I think a lot of times when that's why I don't say I'm a master astrologer, as in, yes, and there's always more to know and learn. There's always, we're never at the end of it. And I think a lot of times people see master is either, in it's the States especially, it takes a different connotation. But people don't understand it means you're able to teach. And when you're a teacher, you're always learning. And so, yeah, I know what the word means and I love it. I just know how other people perceive it.
Mm.
And it gets, we're dealing with Tumblr spirituality. So I try to lessen my battles. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, in definition for a Taoist,
Yes,
master is student is the teacher is the student.
absolutely.
Forever, that symbiosis is forever.
Yes,
The second you stop and you
yes,
believe you are all knowing, you
yeah,
know nothing. And that
yes,
refers to my teacher, the Jade Emperor. When you accept you know
yes,
nothing, you know everything.
yes, yes,
Oh, oh.
yeah,
And that meets that resonance. And
yeah,
it is potent.
it is.
It's
It is.
absolutely potent because you can sink your teeth into it. That's the excitement of that this substance, this energy potential is a developed sensory perception. And the more you develop it, the more you are aware. And so
Yes.
all of a sudden the sprouts of offshoots of what that is quite simple. For me, people, oh, you're a Taoist priest. Well, what does that mean? I teach people clairvoyance, mediumship, channeling, energy healing. It
Yes.
doesn't really matter. It all starts with understanding the fundamentals. So
Yes.
the ecosystem for energy potential for a Taoist starts with the upper Dantian, that's the sun. The middle Dantian is the earth. The lower Dantian is the moon. And people are like, what? What is that? What? Excuse me? And we're not talking about the moon. These are also byproducts of the primordial mother.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the animation of the substance.
Mm-hmm.
So we have the void, which then animates the consciousness animates the spirit animates the energy animates the body, and so forth and so on. And
Yes.
furthermore, there's a gap for a Taoist between spirit and consciousness, where there's 4 levels of ascension where we integrate gold, platinum, and silver, sun, earth, and moon. There are other components that solidify that knowing, and you become all knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And that requires none of your participation.
Mm-hmm.
That means that you are not required for this now moment. And so
Right.
I always tell people, don't erase yourself. This
Mm-hmm.
is a bad just the idea of erasing your personality is problematic.
It is very problematic. We're not meant to kill the ego. The ego is the will to survive. Um, at all. Integration. Integrate. Is the most important thing. And you can imagine as a middle-aged woman with not just one or two opinions. I have more than once on the web been, you're so arrogant. I'm like, I often just rebut with, well, I am French in ancestry, but it isn't. If you know, it's not arrogance. If you're confident, it's not
Well,
arrogance.
well, isn't it the very reflection of their deficiency?
Yeah,
The inverted effect promotes this
yeah,
unhinged, ungrounded,
yes,
basically Tourette's that comes off the internet with someone meeting this moment. And your resonance is having them meet the moment. Hey, we're looking in the mirror, and
yes,
guess what? This is the fundamental hump or hill
exactly.
that you need to
Yeah,
get over or destroy
yes.
because you're meeting it through Laurie,
Right, right.
which
And
is
and
so funny.
sometimes I take on the Church of Pee Wee Herman and just go, I know you are, but what am I? Um, and they get a little annoyed at that. And people don't realize you can be spiritual and masterful and have a sense of humor too. It's like everything gets so serious and Like, yeah, 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 but look at the joy. Go watch some animals for a day. Go watch them as they play and poke at each other and trick each other, and whether birds or even dogs, they'll play jokes on each other if you pay attention. We're not meant to just always be serious, even when the world, and especially when the world looks very serious, because to exude fun and joy and irreverency, that's actually a dispelling of a particular kind of magic being operated that is maybe not to our benefit. So
Well, it always comes back to, my teacher, Jade Emperor, when you act in virtue, you have none. It's the
yeah,
very opposite. It's the
yeah,
very fundamentals of all things. It's like this notion that you have to uphold a persona within your psyche to relate to the rest of the world.
yeah,
When you detach and attach as all things, there is this moment of what someone would refer to as a desensitizing moment where you are absent. Nothing moves my needle when I am
hmm,
observing the present moment. When
yeah,
I've ever witnessed a healing, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, it does not require my participation.
no,
So that is the very, and that all comes down to, as we mentioned before, with the universe doesn't have a moral compass.
right,
Understanding that this is a relationship within this substance. When you master the alchemy, it's all got to do with energy potential. So now you become more and more in this present moment. Your ability to laser focus. You there, Laurie? We'll get her back here. Something's happened. I'm sure this. Here we go. She's back. Is she back? Almost back. Let me see if I can try another. Uh, let's check this out. Let me try another signal here. Okay. She went off for a second here. There, you're back again. Hang
can
on.
you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. I have a full signal. I wasn't sure what happened there. How'd you go? Can you hear me? Laurie,
Oh,
can you hear me?
I can now. So
Okay.
I'm sorry I gave you editing to do.
No, not a problem. I don't. I can change the the. I can use a hotspot. See what happens there. How are
Okay.
you
Well,
on your end?
unfortunately I had a call coming in that even
Oh,
though
I see. I see.
I
Okay.
didn't take the call, but it killed the connection.
Oh, I got you. I
So
got you.
there we
There
go.
we go. We're back. We're back in the game.
We're
So
back.
and this is a fundamental issue that people become spiritual and they just that's the answer. And everyone else is beneath me. I'm more ascended and
Mhm.
aware, and that's the actual delusion. That's the
Yes.
very issue because they're
Mhm.
they're they're conceptual and they're
Yes.
they're full of all this information. I refer to them as information sucks. They just want to
Mhm.
they want to absorb more and more. Keep
Right.
re- I need more. I'm just curious. Really, you've
Hmm.
absorbed like 1,000 different ways up the mountain, yet you still are not realized with your own experience that can validate it.
Right.
Because I'm a Pepsi challenge guy from the 80s. I'll take the Pepsi taste test with anyone. Show
Right.
me what it is that you are you are able to tap into. I want to see it. I want to experience it. And I mean, you and I instantly, this whole experience, any of my students or subscribers that watch these conversations, they're
Hmm.
watching and experiencing this conversation. It's not just
Yeah.
throwaway words. We're
No.
experiencing this visceral, kinesthetic, somatic
Yes.
response from the unity that's coming here, the union, the communion that we're having.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people, you can see a deadpan. You would know this better than most, and I experienced it the same way. I know when someone's full of shit. I can feel it. I
Yeah.
don't need to do much.
Yeah. No. No. Years ago, I was in a spiritual community that would put on retreats, and I would always teach on resistance patterns because I felt I had mastered those very well in my own life. Meaning I was really good at resisting things and needed a celestial sledgehammer half the time to pound sense into me. Luckily, our guides and the benevolent beings around us, they're never giving us a hard time. We just, if the only way you can perceive is through sarcasm and a celestial sledgehammer, that's what's going to materialize. The minute you don't, you're not, something's not bonking you on the head. That's how you're receiving it. But they would invite these headliners to come teach, and some of them were very famous in the New Age or whatever community. And almost inevitably, they were the people who had either the man bun or the flowing robes or whatever. And yeah, not even close. Seriously, you're tame, man. Um, and they'd, catch you up and be like, I can enlighten you. Let me help you with your yoni, types. And I'd be like, that's not how you do that. You know? No. Um, it's hubris. And we can all have it. I've had my moments too. I still do. I think if we don't admit to being human and all of it, and I do channel and I channel ancient wisdom. But I never tell people when I'm channeling because I don't want their power placed here.
Right.
Really sensitive people can feel it or sense it or see it, but I don't want it here. I saw what happened too many times in spiritual communities around, call them what you will. Too many times people would put it in, and I've had it happen to me as well, where people give us hope, give us hope. I'm like, I'm not God. I can't. I'm not that for you. You have to give it to you. It's a real bummer to have that kind of responsibility. I feel bad for the universe some days. Think of all the requests. Do they get a day off? But
Well, it's a conditioning, right?
yeah, yeah, it's social
Embodying
cultural conditioning. Yeah.
that tactile
Mhm.
embodiment is where
Mhm.
you start to realize
Mhm.
your own knowing through that
Yeah.
self mastery.
Yeah.
That's why the simplicity of things. Yet, it doesn't. I like driving my side by side in the desert at 100 miles an hour, eating chocolate bonbons, and I still, unfortunately, subscribe to Netflix. That does not require anything to do with a healing moment. It's right now.
Yeah.
And, none of my personality is even present.
Mhm.
I feel like I've taught I've got 6 kids, and I've taught them all a very, very, very clear understanding of the mechanisms that
Yeah.
are part of this experience. And so, more recently, we were met with a very potent moment as a family for healing,
Mhm. Mm.
where my youngest son literally was dead for 2 minutes in my wife's arms. And
Oh
my
gosh.
children and myself brought his spirit. I watched his spirit leave.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
we all brought his spirit back
Mm.
through that. But I wasn't having him, oh my goodness, my son, I'm going to.
Right.
Someone would look at me and go, really? You've got nothing to say? I'm just
Yes.
witnessing and experiencing and
Mhm.
observing the present
Mhm.
moment. And
Mhm.
through that, as that resonance is clear as it's being transmitted,
Yes.
the connection is undeniable, and the
Yes.
potency, you can feel
Yes.
that, what I'm speaking is true.
Yes.
And all my
Yes.
children got together. They weren't panicking and freaking out.
Yeah.
They cuddled together as
Mm.
a 5 team healing
Oh,
potency, and
beautiful.
we all drew my son back into his body, and he came
Mhm.
back like Frankenstein on an operation table. It was
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
it was, I've transitioned hundreds of people in my lifetime. I've never
Yes.
witnessed one of my own children literally leave.
Yeah.
And it was potent, but it wasn't until the 2020 hindsight of after the
Yes.
experience that I
Yes.
was able to digest it for my own healing. At the moment,
Yes.
someone would look at me like, "You're not doing anything. What are you talking about? Oh my goodness, you're not even like the." You watch his eyes just pop out, his spirit leave. He's
Yes.
lifeless.
Yes.
And you're like, how can you not meet that with a reaction? Well, ha ha, this is the very problem.
Hmm.
And when you are not at a place of that knowing, you
Yes.
will be met with the battle tested experience that your your human being will have to meet that through the human condition.
Yes.
And that is where things you get down
Yes.
with the get down, the wet ass hour of what is that? Are you going to talk the talk or walk the walk? Are you
Yes.
able to truly attune to this, or is it just a
Yes.
bunch of bullshit that you've been propagating for years?
Right.
And that's where I find that I believe I have this. I've seen this over and over again. You've probably seen the same thing. It's my goodness. And when they see you, when they
Yes.
go, you see me, they disappear. They will not have a conversation. They don't want to be in the same space. They're not met with, hey, oh shit, you can see that. It's like the emperor's new
Right.
clothes that
Yeah.
you and I are
Yeah.
able to see. It's like, hang on,
Yeah.
whoa,
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
see that I'm full of shit. I haven't like, you know, massage someone into some light hypnotic trance that they can just be manipulated through
Right.
my action or inaction. And furthermore, most of these people love to use things like NLP or something
Yes.
that's very, very, very infantile. And
Yes.
I'm not a fan of NLP. I have a real issue with people because there's only one goal. I want to control people. It's
Mm.
not I want everyone to I'm here to help. No,
No,
no.
there's
It's the
there's a
same
lot of that
energy.
and a lot of healing modalities
Right.
in that world. Is that I want to heal people, not understanding you're creating conditions for the person to heal themselves. You're creating a container and an energetical frequency. Should they meet and attune to it, then they're taking the responsibility for their healing. Um, and it's a co-creative process. It's not, you're never the one, I have healed, did you? Um,
Well,
no.
it's like you mentioned before. I had the same thing when I first experienced and witnessed the healing. It's like, holy shit, I don't want anyone else to be the next coming of Jesus. I got to contain it.
Right.
It lasted me literally 3 days, but I was met with conflict because I'm
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I can't share this with anyone. I'm
Right.
special. And it took me
Right.
about 3 days and
Right.
through the tutelage of Latsu to go, this is how it worked. Oh,
Right.
okay. And I
Right.
just let go of it. It's like the more you teach people, the more you expose them to this
Right.
resonance, the more it returns back to you.
Right.
Oh,
It does. Yes.
okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's mutual. It's mutuality. Um, Years and years ago, gosh, 1999, so a long time ago, I had just met with this community, and the whole reason I was involved is there was a gentleman named Thomas C. Chavez, and he was probably one of the most gifted healers I'd ever met. Very talented, very well educated, understood the principles. But I was on my way, and at the time I was a single mother, and I had two small children. And my son has a very big head. He's a very big man now. He grew into it. But as a toddler, we weren't sure he would. Big noggin. And he fell asleep on the bus. And I was holding his head and wrangling a stroller, and my 5-year-old was holding on to my coat. And I slammed my hand into the bar of the bus. And of course, all of that noggin. And I broke my pinky, and I knew I did.
Wow.
And as we made our way to the building where they gathered, someone saw my pinky and it was about the size of a plum. And they said, "Oh, go show Thomas, he'll fix it." And I was like, okay. And I was fairly new in this group. And so I walked over and I said, "They said to see you." And he said, "Ah," waved his hand, and my
Mhm.
finger shrunk.
Yeah.
And I went, "Well, how the heck did you do that? I want to know." And he didn't claim it. He goes, "Well, you did that. I just helped, you know." And so he was one of my many, many teachers, and had he was so skilled. He just passed away. Um, um, Returned, and returned well.
How old was he?
He was 76.
Yeah. Yeah.
76. And
This is this is kind of
um,
the measure of
mhm,
mortality, which I
mhm,
find, and I have for my whole experience, is everyone is still met with the obsession and not
mhm.
realizing that this flesh is an anchor, and if
Yeah,
you nurture it and you codify it
yeah,
within the alchemical process, you never tap into your own state.
yeah,
All healers that I come
mhm,
across that end up on
yeah,
my doorstep,
yeah,
energy healers, Chinese medicine,
yeah, yeah.
acupuncturists, whatever, I always ask them one question, and they're like, "Well, what's the question? How do you feel at the end of your day?" "I'm exhausted."
Mhm, mhm,
Well, that is absolutely fundamentally the answer, Watson, to your very question of how to master yourself
mhm,
and to return to that wholeness.
mhm,
Because people, as I put it, it's like sacrificing, they literally sell their soul. And it's
mhm,
not just words, they
mhm.
sell their essence,
They do.
and
Yes.
it comes in that
Yes.
form. Have you noticed that
Yes.
yourself? Or
Yeah, I've had moments, usually, when I'm overdoing it, because I tend to do that sometimes. Um, and when I'm working one-on-one with clients, if I'm not tending myself and my needs, and I'm overdoing it because I have the habit of being a mother, I will overextend my energy. And then I'm very tired. If I hold my consciousness, I can go days and days and days and days on limited sleep. And so I've just come off a hiatus of, in fact, and this week is another one, but I'll be doing other work. And I limited my hours because I was like, well, right now my body is needing more calibration time because we're continually growing and evolving, and that happens at a cellular level too. And I learned that from Thomas, but he lived a life too, you
Hmm.
know. And he went through the great humbling of having lost his eyesight and being a healer, and people saying, well, why couldn't you heal your eyesight? And I said, well, maybe he needs that experience for this lifetime to access other parts of his energetical experience. That didn't mean he failed as a healer. um, that may have been exactly what he needed to put himself in the right space. And since we're all eternal anyway, it's just a freaking meat suit, you
It
know?
really is. I mean, that obsession, people throw the same in the same basket, Taoism and Buddhism, but they're
Yeah,
fundamentally
yeah,
different. I
very
mean,
different. Yeah,
Buddhism for me, out of all the 20 friends I have as Buddhist monks that walk the monastic path, they're in a very similar sort of self-realized
yes,
divinity, which
yes,
is basically a pile of shit covered in diamonds, and they just take up another diamond looking for more dukkha, more distortion, and
right,
they want to return that, and that's just part of what their experience is in their lifetime, and they
right.
throw the avatar away and they move on to the next one. That's
Yeah,
completely fine. A
yeah,
Taoist does not look at their reality this way.
hmm,
Everything is a bellows. Everything is contracting and expanding at the same
yeah,
time. You're all things and nothing at the same time. The true mastery is your Sherlock to your Watson. If your mission, if you choose to accept it, Ethan Hunt, is to find the center point.
hmm,
That center point is that unity, and you can hold that like a sweet
yeah,
note, like a
yeah,
nectar. And
yeah,
when you hold it, it becomes a default. It's a
yeah,
conditioning, though. This is the mastery of the alchemy,
yeah,
is to embody that as your default. And
yes,
then it doesn't matter what the personality does, it will not affect the transmission of what that true essence is, which is now. And
yes,
so, a lot of people tend to they get caught up in the semantics and they're, oh no, I'm doing this, I'm that. Listen, it will show itself to you. You don't
yeah,
have to be a genius to understand the diminished returns of mortality.
yeah,
And within my teacher Jade Emperor always says, remind the man mortality is real,
hmm,
and let the man who has never left the village, let him know he has seen the world,
hmm,
because it's right here.
hmm. Exactly. We can tune in at any point. We like the physical experiences because they seem more real, but they're no less real than when you read a book and you're in a new dimension. Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely addicted to the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual healing. The physical
Mhm.
stuff it always excites me and has for over
Mhm.
36
Sure.
years. I still witness it, but I teach people, like there's 3 people I'm aware of and that I've met that can levitate, and these are all just mastered states of cultivation.
Yeah.
2 of them were Indonesian masters in Indonesia, and then there's this one person who happened to be one of my students that met the required residents, and I gave him the manual. It's a
Cool.
manual. It's a
Mhm.
formula. You follow it, but you must be able to meet it at a certain point. When that's
Right.
accessible, it's handed to you. I'm not the keeper of this stuff for it never to be revealed. It's just
Right.
you have to meet the conditioning, the adaptation, the stress, and then the contraction and expansion is
Right.
how you are able to acquire
Right.
that. And that's just a
Mhm.
mastery. And that third person was a student of mine. And then people are like,
Mhm.
well, Jifu, well, how come you don't levitate? Because I couldn't give a shit about that. I mean,
Right.
these are sensory perceptions that are developed.
Right.
And what I would always be problematic is when you acquire that state is you become obsessed with it. That's what I would pull someone aside and say, okay,
The
look,
attachment to it.
you've
Yeah.
already achieved that. That's fantastic. It's never
Mhm.
going to leave you.
Mhm.
Yet don't be distracted. Continue moving forward in your path.
Mhm.
And that can be something you can meet any moment at any time.
Mhm.
Yet people become the bauble is, it's like, oh my goodness, I can heal people instantly. I can
Mhm.
do this, I can do that. And that was my biggest crossroads was the first time I witnessed a healing was gangrenous flesh coming back to pink in color in 40 minutes. And I
Mhm.
sat there because I was like, oh, we got to rush this person to a hospital
Mhm.
in my
Mhm.
mind. And I'm having this
Mhm.
conversation with Latsu, and he's like, no. I'm like, what are you talking about? We're
Mhm.
going to witness a healing. I'm like, no. And this is
Mhm.
the funny part is, I mean, we can go on my story. It's all over the internet, but it all happened progressively within 5 days. I was
Fun.
met with never meditating to stopping sound to channeling my teacher to experiencing and being able to embody clairvoyance to a
Right.
distant healing instantaneously to finally witnessing a physical healing within a 5 day period. I
Right.
woke up and then I had 5 days of a dark night of the soul, which a spiritual person would call, that
Yeah.
was met with, imminent death where I wanted to commit suicide because there was just too much at once. But
Mhm.
that was it. I had
Yep.
my banger, and that was my entry into remembering who I was. Now,
Yeah.
this happens on a daily basis. Yeah. Speaking on your teacher waving his hand and the
Yes.
swelling disappeared, the finger was
Yeah.
back to normal.
Yeah.
I see this all the time.
Yeah.
I experience it and witness it all the
Yeah.
time. And so, people are like, holy crap, how is this possible? It's
Mhm.
all got to do with resonance.
It is
Oh,
completely, it's all on frequency, all on resonance and learning to attune. And honestly, the whole purpose of that experience was when even
show
Thomas
you
was
what's
a little,
possible.
yeah, it was just shows possible. It showed there was somebody who could give names to the things I could do that I knew I could do that I didn't talk about because it was weird. And but also he got a student who would actually pay attention because my job isn't to be a healer in this lifetime. All those healing techniques were to keep me the hell alive so I could live to the moment of the teaching. They get used once in a while if somebody needs it. But I'm a teacher. I
Yeah.
just create containers.
Yeah. Oh,
You
yeah.
know, but it
Oh,
was just part of the experience, and people don't realize that I've got a million certifications, a million trainings, ordinations. They're just part of an experience. And what Thomas used to call, and I love to refer to it as a bag of tricks. You
yeah.
got your bag of tricks, and,
You
and you meet people on the road, and instead of patching them up and, give them a tool.
that fact that you got right down to the get down, which is the container,
Yeah.
because what happens with most people is they discover they're healers. Oh my goodness, I just woke up one morning, I'm a psychic, I'm a medium, I'm a healer.
Mhm,
Wow.
mhm,
And then they go out and they start applying it, and they're like, oh my goodness, I healed this person, I did that, I did
mhm,
this, I did
mhm,
that. And then
mhm.
a few days later you come back with, you're a fraud. it didn't work.
Uh-huh.
It held for a day or two and it's gone. It's like
Mm-hmm.
people have a very short memory.
Mm-hmm.
So they're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my goodness. And the biggest issue that people have is they're not developing the recipient's ability to hold that resonance.
Yes.
And
Yes.
once they hold it, it's
Yeah.
there. And that could be
Yes.
made instantaneous. There's no question about it. Like
Oh
you can
yeah, it
meet
doesn't have to
someone
take years
and
if
that,
you can
but
key it in. Yeah.
but the most important thing is they must share with that recipient that these are the fundamentals. So if you will meet this healing and it's instant, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Your ability to embody that is for you to decide,
Yes.
because you're experiencing the energy. It's showing you that what's possible, which is whole. You're being whole. You're returning to whole. That's the definition of healing. Now it's for you to determine whether that is a permanence, which would seem an impossibility, yet absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And you have to be able to show people, but then they have to be able to show themselves because they're
Right.
experiencing it. And, I've had people that are so delusional. They're, I'm a Catholic or whatever, and then they meet me, and within a few seconds, they're like, "Well, what do we need to do?" And I'm like, "We're just having a conversation for a minute." Okay, we've talked for 5 minutes. Now, what do I need to do? I'm like,
Right.
"Nothing. It's done."
Right.
They're like, "What are you
Right.
talking about?" Well, you've got this issue or that issue. Yeah, I can't move my arm. I couldn't get it up over my. Oh my
Mm-hmm.
goodness, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
I had a torn rotator cuff. There's no pain there
Mm-hmm.
because that's all it takes. Now that,
Mm-hmm.
examples like that happen over and over again. But these people, when they're so hit soberly with this bang, and it defies their belief systems and everything that's
Oh,
created their
yes.
realities thus far, they meet it with resistance, as you put it,
Right. Right.
and they
And
want to
resistance is
create,
human. Yeah.
deconstruct it.
Yeah. Yeah. Resistance is the most human thing because we live in a planet where resistance is part of the experience because without gravity we wouldn't be here, so us walking around is defying gravity. We're in resistance to it. That's why it really sucks when we meet gravity and when we trip and we fall down, um because we're actually aligning to the gravity. But it's important not to judge the resistance. It's just important to, the powers in the noticing, the perfections in the correction, right? And so noticing and constant calibration and tweaking. And it's hard. The harder or the more firm your indoctrination, which are tools of oppression, and we're taught to self-oppress, the firmer the indoctrination, the harder the pushback sometimes, when you have that miracle and then it's like, oh no, not me, wham, you know, and you'll go back to whatever state it was. And there's also habitual states. So you have a lot of practice at maybe having a torn rotator cuff, right? And you have less practice, remember it being well. And so, and that can be an oversimplified answer to a lot of people who think, it has to be a lot more complicated. So working through resistance, um, is probably one of the more meaningful things you can do, is to understand how to recognize it, not beat yourself up for it, and then just adjust it. Like, oh, I just said I can't. Maybe I could rephrase that a little bit. Um, and say, I haven't gained the skills yet. That's a little bit better up on the frequency, because I found in my own practice, because I've created a process. Right now, I just call it the modern mystery school, but it's actually what I call the Annie process, and it's a framework for people to self-realize, um, in a group experience. So there's a framework. The meetings only last an hour. Nobody has time for long things. They're gatherings, right? The only dogma is the agenda because it keeps you on time and it helps focus mental processes. but there's no dogma on belief. If you want to believe in the flying spaghetti monster, somebody else wants to be a Taoist, somebody else is Catholic, somebody else is a Satanist. It doesn't matter because we're not evangelizing to each other. That's a personal walk. But in that process, that's what people are being taught to teach themselves through a question and answer process. What their beliefs are so they can deconstruct in a healthy way. Because a lot of times, and I found this in working with clients about 20 years ago, I would, in my eagerness, want to bring them up to this high resonance, and they'd get there and then they'd bounce like a rubber ball and they'd go into the dark night of the soul, want to end it, and then come back to euphoria. And it was like a loop between heaven and hell. And I thought, that doesn't work very well. I think we need something to help people, because our whole, when we look at the Western world specifically, but I've lived in, um, well, it's Asia Minor. I lived in the Middle East. It's not just Western culture. It's a human experience where we've defined and described how reality is supposed to go in a way that disempowers who we are. And it really goes back to the Bronze Age. It's not even anything that happened in the last couple hundred years. This is habits of thought and habits of culture and habits of belief. And there are occasionally people like you, people like me, people who find a route, whatever that route is, who kind of stand outside of culture, and we're teachers, right? But if you can create enough of, and this is a theory, I'm working on it. I've got several hundred people who've done it over the years, pushing 1,000. But if you can get that critical mass where people are starting to learn to deconstruct so they're not running into the cognitive bias that causes that pushback, we don't have to have these loops over and over, not just the heaven and hell loop, but like every generation, a new freaking teacher has to come along wherever. If we can deconstruct that cultural bias, maybe we can hit another rung of frequency. Fingers crossed. I don't know. It's a calling. I can't tell you if it's going to work out. It's an experiment.
Well, I think it's amazing. Let's talk, current, world landscape, right?
Yes.
So let's just talk 2025, which is a really potent year for endowers. Yet most people tend to, because we start with the one creates the divine feminine, the two is the divine feminine, the three is the masculine. We can go on and on, but from a numerology sort of like ascended state, these are very fundamental transmuted things that
Yes.
people can identify and use as a language.
Yes.
Furthermore, we always return to the highest point, which is a diamond of perfection, which is completion, the nine. And then from that, you return to the birth and creation, which is happening all the
All
time.
the time.
You can access that center point we call the Wu Ji, which is the primordial mother, which is the substance, the Fajun, the animation. That means it's whole, it's unified. And from that, you can birth things like Wu Wei, effortless
Yes.
action, effortless effort, which is the secret source of serendipitous synchronistic moments. So
Yes.
now we have this sort of like understanding of, okay, well, this is a mastered method. Yes, that's it. That's what it comes down to. And so when we look at today, like Lutzu was very clear in the next 12 to 24 months, the resonance and frequency of the earth will go from 7.8. It's currently in a 12 to 18 hertz, and we're going to sit at 40 to 60 hertz as a regular as people start to move
Elevate.
the goalpost, and that resonance is just transmitted throughout planet Earth. And
Yes.
so from that, you have this dance, this symbiosis between good and bad, up and down, in and out. Right now, turbulence seems, imminent. that this is exactly what's going to happen. It's like, oh my goodness, everything's going to fall to shit. The finances, the world stage, everything is destroyed. Yet he's very clear that absolutely not. Things will become more and more calm as the earth uses the magnetism of its potency through the relationship with the sun. We
Mm-hmm.
have the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
So we refer to it as the rainbow.
Right.
This light spectrum is only going to embody and draw these energies in, creating calm,
Yes.
enriching the grounding effect that people would say that's not possible. Look at the world. By the
Yeah.
we're about to we're about to fall into a suck hole that's going to destroy mankind as we know it. And I'm like, no,
No.
actually, it's going. This year will end with like so much grounding and calm, and people are like, that's not possible. And I would love you to explain your wisdom teaching from your perspective as an astrologer that
So about
your what your
25.
knowing
Yeah.
is.
So in 1997, I had a teacher. Now, this was all through online connections, but Cosmo was his real name, not even a username. Cosmo was about 90. And everybody always thinks old people can't use computers, but who do you think built them? But anyway, Cosmo got a hold of me on the message board we were on, and he said, Laurie, I need you to look at these dates because I'm not going to live to see them, but you will. And he threw me some dates from 2020 and he threw me some dates for 2025. Astrologers have been looking at these for a very, very long time. And the astrology of 2020 basically blew, it was like a detonation at the foundation of a pillar. And then over the last 4 years, we've watched the pillar tumble. That pillar was no longer useful. We're building a new reality. Now, regardless of what political party in the United States were to have won the big prize, we would still be in chaos, different kinds. In a very non spiritual way, I describe this to my audience as one way had lube, one way did not. Guess which one we got? Thanks a lot, folks. Because we have collective consciousness, individual consciousness, and collective consciousness. Well, this is going to wake a lot of people up. And there's a lot, well, nobody wakes up without a crisis. Nobody suddenly wakes up and goes, I'm one with the universe. It usually takes some slap down before you cry uncle, before you realize you're connected. And this is the biggest change in human history here in 2025 in 4,500 years. It's a very large jump in consciousness, which means it's going to be messy. And our job is to hold our consciousness regardless of the mess. And you can even leverage it to your advantage. This could be the best year of your life personally. Really could if you can hold your consciousness. The people who haven't had that experience yet may have a different experience, and they're not attracting doom to themselves. They're not making this happen. We're not going to victim blame. It could be there for this incarnation in this meat suit. There is experiences, and I always say not everything happens for a reason, but the reason can be found in everything. Because I think it's very important not to say, oh, well, you attracted that heinous experience. Um, no, we don't pick those things out. That's a ridiculous. The universe does not care. It does not operate. It doesn't say, you were so bad in your last life. I'm going to make you really suffer in this one. No. But so for 2025, what I do see at a metaphysical level, besides the very human experience, which it will be very uncomfortable for some, for others, they again could be some of the best years of their life. I always say, if it's your turn, take it. If you're having to, don't feel guilty about it. Enjoy it because your enjoyment and your joy may be just what the collective needs. You may make more of an impact in your local community that way. So on a metaphysical level, it is forcing awareness. And those of us who have maybe more practice at it, I would put it that we're always practicing, we're always learning, we're always calibrating. Um, we'll probably attract more students through the process, and the students will find that they know more than they thought they did because they're going to be reminded of the simplicities. I don't see that humanity is going to die out. I think we will have to adapt very rapidly, and some people will adapt better than others because that's just some people run faster than others. Some people can't run at all, and they're going to have to adapt in different ways. Um, some of it won't look good on the outside for a little bit, but by the end of the year, there will be a quiet and a stillness. Mostly, kind of like you're tired afterwards. That's really when I did last, because I always do a year ahead in June. So for the summer solstice, I give my predictions for the year ahead, just to prove accuracy. And I had for December of 2025, it's very still, it's very quiet. People are very tired and probably pinching themselves that they made it through the year.
Right. It
I
was
think,
never as it seems.
yeah, it was never going to be an easy year.
Yeah. It's like the cathartic letdown. You had the Tourette's run riot over your psyche, and then you were like, oh, my bad.
Yeah,
Oh, I feel so much better now.
yeah, yeah. When you stop hitting your toe with a hammer, eventually it doesn't hurt. Um, and we've been doing that collectively, and there are ramifications for what's going on. But the more we can hold our consciousness, the more we can assuage the current now to move in a direction that is more amenable. And we've missed a couple worst case scenarios this year. I know it doesn't look like that to people, but we really have. And we've ticked over. So, like, the future is never set in stone. It's like a tree with many branches, and each decision branches and forks, and eventually you make enough decisions in a certain line, it will look like karma, right? Because you've put yourself into consequences. That branch thins out, right? And if you go too far out on a thin branch, it goes crack. Um, but we're still on sizable enough branches. They haven't thinned out to the point of no return. So there's several possibilities. So I'm currently watching events for this month of April, to see at the end of the month how things transpire, because that'll inform the next happenings. And a lot of those I am not speaking out loud, because they would scare the hell out of a lot of people. So I try my best not to. People will call me a fearmonger, and I'm like, are you kidding? If I told you everything I saw as a possibility, you'd never sleep again. Sometimes I don't sleep with the information that I'm developing through, process. Um, if you don't have hope, you have nothing. So I think, um, again, my guidance has been such, it's better to teach people this year how to come to a space of calm. And that's center point, where they can listen for impulse that informs their next step into the next now. And that's going to be more useful than telling people to run for the hills. I know it's not as sexy as the doom and gloom, but I don't see doom and gloom at the end of this. I do see, we get through it somehow. And
Well, yeah.
hopefully with hopefully wanting to build something new.
Right, right. I mean, That's the default. That's the very, contracting and expanding that we speak
Yes.
of. It's
Yeah.
always there's always going to be a completion and a rebirth. It's the nature of this, currency.
Yeah.
Understanding that, but I mean, Latsu is always so cheeky when he speaks to others, and people are like, well, what's going to happen? And he's like, imagine you're like a grain of sand, asking the beach, what are we doing today?
Right.
Fall back into the beach and be realized.
Yeah.
And people
Yeah.
are like, and I sit there and he says stuff like this. I go, you can make this shit up. I'm as dumb
Right.
as rocks, and I sound like I actually am transmitting something of value.
Right.
I feel I feel very grateful to be able to witness this, but this is just information of understanding this deeper nature.
Yeah.
And once you realize that you are me, I am you,
Yeah.
there's zero need or evidence that would require all these transmuted effects of fear, anxiety,
Yeah.
hopelessness, helplessness. It
Doesn't do
just
any good.
dissolves and returns back to whole.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Well, and it does, and it's a great experiment, right? And so if it's, I think I get asked a lot by people, when is it going to be better? And the answer is always when we make it better. How is it not good for you right now? You personally, how is it in your life not good in the moment? Take away everything happening around you. If you're not personally embroiled in that, like if you're doing okay, how are you not okay? And my mother is going to be 78 next month. And she's a little tiny thing who will never slow down ever and managed to fall. Not an old lady fall. She's been falling like this my whole life because she was guarding the tulips from the deer and got caught in the wire that she was putting over and then put her hand down and caught herself. So she fractured her wrist. She lost a great deal of money of her retirement account in present economic times. And she looked at me and smiled. She said, gosh, it's a good life. I think I'd be worried about this if I had more time on the planet, but I figured I got about 10 years and we're good. I said, there's the wisdom, Mom. You are good regardless.
and sometimes you get the banger, right?
Yeah.
Banger is, my mother, she just turned 81.
Oh.
And throughout her whole life, having, chronic asthma and emphysema,
Mm.
ultimately diagnosed, 30, 40 years ago, having emphysema. Oh, you're not going to make it. You won't make 50, just realize that that's all you got. She was
Yeah.
being told this in her 30s.
Right.
And so, the her cynical retesting of the waters with her introspective, analytical sort of negative state, which is just a personality. I keep telling people, your personality does not have the juice. When you understand that, it will not conduct or bistro anything that's going on in this realm.
Right.
Understand that you have to access your true nature of who you are. That's a whole resonance. The
Yes.
personality does not dictate this. So when someone
Yeah.
panhandles you and pushes the narrative that, well, you're a bad person, you made this happen, this, you thought this way and did this, it's just bullshit.
Yeah.
It's not the truth. So she spent decade after decade, all the way up to 81, constantly seeding the glass half empty and never materializing anything but good fucking luck.
Right.
Constantly. One thing after another. I am
Right.
constantly fighting this, meeting with it over and over again.
Right.
And then it's evidence over and over and
Right.
over again, evidence that I can't fight it. I can't manipulate it. That resonance is who I really am.
Yeah.
And so this is sort of just like your mother's story. It's just
Yeah.
amazing because it is the true understanding of the now moment.
Yeah.
And when that comes, that self-realization comes, it may come with a sledgehammer, right? It may
Sometimes.
come with a slap across the face. It's
Yeah.
like that defining moment within Towering Inferno when everyone's running rampant trying to get out, and this woman's panicking and screaming. This Robert Wagner
Right.
grabs her
Right.
and slaps her across the face and says,
Right.
Wake up to yourself. It's like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. I was just a.
Right.
This is the very same thing when you get
It's,
that sledgehammer.
yep.
You know, we have that maybe through NDEs, whatever. I got
Yeah.
hit head on by a car when I was 8. I was dead until they dropped me on the gurney or the bed in the hospital. I was dead for a good 40 minutes.
Wow.
And I witnessed that because I was flying around like Peter Pan because my obsession with super like
Right.
superheroes
Right.
was met with that. So I witnessed my mother mourning my death, my lifeless body on the side of the road, and I watched the whole thing as they drove me back to the hospital. They're attempting to try and resuscitate me, and poof, miracle, bang, not possible. How did that even happen? And then, of course, my spirit was drawn right back into my body
Right.
the second that moment happened. But I
Right.
observed it like Peter Pan for a
Right.
minute.
Which is such an important thing. The perception, your 8-year-old self in love with superheroes, and that's how you got to experience that. It's a really beautiful thing when we, think about what we enjoy. Um, in 1998, I was, because I lived in Bahrain from 1991 until 1997. And then we moved to the Emirates, and I was married to a Bahraini man. He was the father of my children. We were university sweethearts. And unfortunately, he had addiction issues, and things were not good. And he didn't do my paperwork, which is a problem. And I was fine in Bahrain. I had a wonderful community, in family. His family and I got along. Lots of extended cousins, and it was a beautiful way to live. But in Sharjah, because he was a banker and he ended up working in Dubai. But in Sharjah, I was isolated. And things got really, really bad. They were good until they weren't. And I had once sworn I would never come back to the States. I really loved living in Europe. I loved living in the Middle East. Lots of past life experiences, even if I wouldn't have said that at the time, because again, I didn't want to look weird. Even though that's my calling. Anyway, it got very, very bad. And to the point where he was being sent to Switzerland for training, and I had a 7-day window.
Oops, hang
It's
on. Let
okay.
me. Sorry about that.
That's all right. So I had a 7-day window, and I didn't know what I was going to do. He had cut me out of the bank account. I had no food in the house. I had 2 small children. And my paperwork to Bahrain was not finished. I could not get his father, which I didn't understand because his father and I were very close. I couldn't get him to do my visa for me. I said, I'll come back, do my visa, because I can't help you. I can't help you. He was very agitated. Well, we didn't know, but he had Alzheimer's. And it was really starting to manifest then. That didn't become apparent till later. Right. So I sat in the feeling of betrayal. This man who had been like a father to me, we were so close, all of a sudden saying no. So that way was closed. And I sat, and again, I was just 28 at that point because I was 90, no, 29. It was 98 because it was October of 98. We'd been there for like 10 months. And I sat on the couch crying. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't want to go back to the States. Um, it's not a very family friendly place, with 2 small children. And no resources because again I'd been cut out and couldn't work as well because my visa did not allow such. And so I sobbed and sobbed and sobbed, and all of a sudden I heard an outside voice boom in a very dramatic way, go home. And I argued, as one does. I said, I can't go home. Go home. And I went, oh crap, that was outside of me.
Mm.
Now I've gone crazy. Great. But then I thought about it and I was like, well, my family won't let me go hungry. At the very least, we'll have shelter.
Laurie.
Ah, there we
You
go.
there?
Okay.
There we go.
Sorry about that. I
No
had another
worries.
phone call come in. But anyway, so I had 7 days. I went to the American consulate the day he left for Switzerland, and I begged them to write me a letter to immigration because of a family emergency. I figured my life being in danger was good enough for a family emergency. And this was right after Bill Clinton had lied to the United States under oath, by the way. Just keep that in mind. And my background was in international relations and anthropology, right? And so I'm asking this man at the consul to please write this letter. He said, I can't lie to a foreign government. And I said, sir, that's your whole job. And he said, well, this is a personal matter. I'm like, well, it'll become an international matter really, really fast. Because if something happens to me, there's going to be all kinds of inquiries and you'll probably lose your job. And he still wouldn't do it. And I was getting loud and I was very, very thin because I hadn't been eating from the stress. So I was very emaciated. I'm in a suit, but emaciated and just stressed like you wouldn't believe. And he said, ma'am, you have to lower your voice. If you get louder, I'll have the Marines arrest you. And I said, that's great. I get repatriated. You have to repatriate me and my kids. I'll take a federal charge. My life and my children's lives are in danger. He wrote my letter. What do you want it to say? Okay. So that was one thing. That was day one of 7 days. Second day, I'm just trying to get a hold of people to sell whatever we've got, whether it's the record collection, the furniture, the rugs, AC units, whatever, because I'm trying to get enough to get out. Because on Air Sri Lanka, I could get a flight to London, but I can't stay in London because my husband's family had a wide net in the Middle East, and one of them was an ambassador to the court of St. James. So couldn't stay there real long. Was very careful about who I talked to and how I did it. I had friends who could get me from London to the States. We'd figure it out later. That part's arranged. We get to the third day because nothing else is moving. No one's buying anything. I don't care where you are in the world. If you put a moving sign sale up at a grocery store, you're going to have a million vultures show up to buy your stuff and haggle. I don't care if you're in Alabama. I don't care if you're in Sharjah or you're in Prague. A moving sale brings people home, right? No, nobody calling. And I called my uncle, who was a pastor, and I said, hey, I'm doing what your mom should have done. So I was cleaning up family and generational patterns. I'm doing what your mother should have done. I need you to pray for my safety because I was going to take prayers in any form. Didn't care. If it's good, it's good. I'll take it. And he was good prayers. And I was like, okay, he's a good person to call. He prayed for 45 minutes because he did not do short prayers. I still didn't feel better. I landed on my knees, arms outstretched in a very dramatic fashion because I was 29, and said, I can't do this alone. And I swear to God, a purple portal like Doctor Who opened up in front of me. 10 o'clock at night, phone rings. Do you still have things for sale? Yes. It was a lovely lady. She came the next day. Things started to sell. Agreement she would pick them up. I was like, can you come get them on Monday? Because I was hoping to be out of the country by that point because he was coming home on Sunday and this was Wednesday. Yeah, I can come get it on Monday. Great. Um, and then, because this is day four now, a friend I hadn't seen in 6 months popped by and we'd gone to university together and I had always fed him. And I had given him the Irish fisherman sweaters I'd bought at Oxfam for £5 each because he came to from the Middle East to London with cotton sweaters in the winter. I had three. I gave him one and I gave him another like jump because he was a skinny little 17-year-old when I met him. He shows up out of the blue, looks at me, goes, you look like shit. And I went, yeah, I know. Can you get me an alcohol smuggler to Oman? And he's like, you will die. I'm like, I'm going to die anyway. They have to repatriate me if I get to Muscat. And he's like, why don't you call my uncle in immigration, see if that helps? I'm like, he's not going to legally be able to help me. I explained the whole thing. And he's like, no, let's call my uncle in immigration. We called. The guy said, couldn't help me. I'm like, yeah, I knew it. Well, Kamo's mother was her family was very, very important, and she loved me. I hadn't seen her in years, but I had fed her son many years before in university. I fed a lot of people. I was kind of like Snow White. I had a lot of dwarves as a young person. And I think he talked to her. I will never know, but I got a call in the middle of the night that said, show up at 7. Show up to immigration at 7. Yes, I will. I go. I get yelled at a colonel, or a colonel yells at me, calls me a stupid woman, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yes, sir, I am stupid. Yes, 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 whatever. And the tears weren't easy. Or weren't hard because I was scared to death. Because if they decided at any point um, that I was lying, which I kind of was, but I wasn't, I could be in a really bad jail, right? This was not going to be fun. And so I got to a major. He just questioned the family emergency, and I said, my grandmother. Because my grandmother was like 81 at the time, and I thought, well, she's going to die someday, right? She's close. I could get close because I suck as a liar. So I was like, okay, what's the closest thing? Grandma. Okay. He passes me to the general. The general goes, I don't want to hear it. Be out of here in the next 5 days. I'm like, I'm out of here tomorrow. So it was boom, boom, boom. And I made it back to the States. I had no money, no way of making that happen. It was miracle after miracle. And all of that happened after just a month before, where I sat and I had returned to meditating, because I'd stopped meditating for a while because I was very much in the struggle and the pain story and the why me and abuse to abuse. And this is my lot in life. And I was a young astrologer. I hadn't gained the years of experience I have today. And it just, all of it looked like it sucked. And it was never going to be anything else. And I was meditating about a month before this happened. And I reached that space where you have connection with all that is, just to let go and find that connection. And I connect those two together. And I came back to the States, and it was not an easy ride, mostly because I didn't believe it could be. Um, and it was a huge catalyst in life. So those are the miracles we can establish. And I once asked one of my teachers, I was like, so why did that all coalesce? And I said, I was kicking and screaming the whole way. I was in resistance. I know I was. Why did that work? They said, because you still believed it could work enough. You still believed in miracles. And I think that's the difference. That's where you create the resonance. Yeah.
And the experience.
Yeah.
That's what happens. That's how it works.
Yeah. Yeah. So magical people tend to have these kinds of things. And you can be magical too, dear listeners.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation,
Yeah.
my friend.
Thank you.
We'll definitely have to do this again at some point.
Yeah. Well, we'll have you, I'll reciprocate. You can come on to the awake space. So,
Oh, I would love that. I would
yeah.
love that. This is just really important to fuel that ignition, that
Yes.
divinity that's within all of us.
Yes,
And, these conversations are very much that. It's so powerful.
it
And
is.
I'm really grateful for you and us
You try.
sparking up a bond that we've had for many lifetimes. From my perspective, I'm quite aware of that.
I was gonna say you were recognizable. Let's put it that way. So
Yeah.
like, what temples have we been in, my dear friend?
Right, right, right. We're
Yes.
going to explore that further,
Yeah.
my friend.
Yeah.
And, for me, this has been an interesting education for many people to understand that, if you come from biology, neurology, psychology, physiology, astrology, it's limited. You need to understand that embodiment, what
Mhm.
Laurie's talking about, is a mastered state that has basically encompassed everything as whole, and that does not require just an identity sort of like experience that will become very limited. You must be able to move into this now moment, and that requires a starting point. I don't dismiss anyone's starting point, because when you
No,
dismiss someone else's belief system, you dismiss your own. So
absolutely.
that's that part where we all have to use these tools to cultivate our own knowing.
Yeah.
And so never ever lose sight of, oh, well, someone told me I'm just the universe, and that is fantastic for that person. And quite frankly, someone who starts you at that point will probably be met with a diminished return, or is already experiencing that, because there's this need for the YOLO. And we're not talking about YOLO, we're talking about the now moment. Is
Right.
not, it may look the same, but it is not. It is fundamentally different, because you'll be able to feel and hold that resonance. YOLO is literally a diminished inverted return,
Yeah.
where it's just like, let it all ride,
Hmm.
oh, the universe will show up. Enough, please. If someone tells me another story about the universe will guide me in the right place, that is fundamentally true. Yet providing that becomes sort of this relationship that you need to create for yourself
Yeah.
that makes it true,
Yeah.
not just a throwaway conceptual
You
bunch of
can,
bag of words that amount to nothing. You have to have evidence that makes it true to you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You can waste a lot of time sitting and waiting for things to conspire in your favor.
Right,
Yeah.
right, right.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so I'm going to put your interweb and social
Great.
sphere all over this podcast. And
Great.
furthermore, I want everyone that listens to this, from my students all the way through to the subscribers, to go out and experience what Laurie is offering. And I imagine through these connection points, you offer one-on-one sessions, group sessions,
I do.
teaching.
I
What
I
is it?
I I do one-on-one, and I teach classes. And then I have my listeners support my work through a Patreon as well. So where there's all kinds of goodies. So, yeah.
And so I want everyone to go out and experience this. Furthermore, I'm going to ask you one last question in closing. What is your definition of spiritual consciousness?
I think consciousness is spiritual. But if we're going to say spiritual consciousness, then consciousness being awareness, you're aware of that which we have a hard time describing and defining through the physical and seeing in the intangibility. So just being in touch with the tangible and tune.
Amen to that, my friend. And, it's interesting. I've done hundreds of these podcasts, never got the same
Mhm.
answer, as I should
Right?
not, because we're both
Yeah.
facets
Yeah.
of the diamond of perfection, as we put it.
Yes.
And you say
Yes.
tomato, I say tomato, it all returns to the same place.
Absolutely. Well, the blind man and the elephant. So some things are too big for two sets of eyes to see. So that makes it interesting.
Yes,
So,
I'm very grateful for you. Thank you for
thank
coming
you.
on. And we're going to, for the audience, we're going to do a part two. So we will continue this relationship on this channel, and then I'll go over to Laurie's and have
Yeah,
a
come hang
conversation
out at
about.
the awake space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So, in closing, I want to thank you
Thank
for sharing your time with us today. I want to thank the universe for bringing you into my life. And I want to thank the audience for sharing their time with us today. And I am your humble servant and Sifu, Taoist Master San Qing. And I'll see you in the next one, guys.
Thank you.